Okay, so this is my podcast project. I am here today with Martin Metzger, professional jazz, flamenco, blues, rock, and everything in between guitarist, and who was also my dad's high school friend and my personal guitar teacher. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good, Christian. And thank you so much for doing this with me. It's going to be fun.
hmm Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about just your musical journey. So, who were some of your, or why did you pick up the guitar, and who were some of your influences?
Great question. It's kind of funny. I had a big family and I wanted to play the drums because when I was really little, I saw the Muppet guy, Animal, and he was wild and he'd like bang on the drums like a madman. And I was kind of like, I had the same personality when when I was a little guy. So I wanted to play the drums, and my mom said that's gonna be too loud, and we have too many siblings, so she didn't let that happen. So then I didn't know what to do, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And my brother was actually a pretty good trumpet player. Like he was gigging by seventh, eighth grade. He was gigging all around the city in kind of like a Dixieland jazz band, and he was making a lot of money. Actually at that time, all through high school, he did that. So he was playing trumpet, but he had an old cornet, and my mom said, "All right, this is going to be the instrument that you're going to play," which was not what I wanted to do. But actually, I remember going upstairs and learning how to get the embouchure and just being fascinated with trying to learn how to play the thing.
It's
And
kind
so
of,
what's that?
or, that's kind of funny considering my brother plays trumpet.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing is I got pretty good at it. And I think at the time, I don't think we had much of a band, but I think I was like better than the other people in the band because when we did go to band practice at school, this like fifth grade, I was bored out of my brain. Like I could play everything and then he'd work with everybody else trying to get them up. Not that I was that great, but that's how I remember it anyway. And anyway, that lasted about a year, and then I saw a guitar lying around, like my sister's old guitar or something. So I just started picking it up. Um, and oddly enough, when I studied jazz later, one of my jazz teachers said, you phrase on the guitar just like a trumpet player phrases, which I took it and still take today as like a huge compliment because jazz trumpet is such an amazing, it's one of those really amazing instruments and styles for trumpet, and I love the way they play and phrase, and um, apparently I have some of that in my guitar playing. So that's it.
Okay. And some of your influences
Oh
from
yeah, so that's good to talk to you about. So when I started, one of my biggest influences was my brother's friend, John Plankenhorn, who is a fantastic guitar player, and he was like a true artist. That was what's so cool about him because he was already like playing Yes and playing Pink Floyd and playing Zeppelin, but he was also writing his own songs in high school, and he had like an amazing band, and they do really complicated songs like Long Distance Runaround by Yes or like Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group. I mean, really like progressive stuff even today for high school students. So he was a great musician, and I would beg him for lessons. And like a true artist, he didn't want to teach me. So I'd beg him when he was over at my house, and then he'd show me some stuff, but he kept telling me, "You need another teacher." So I kind of did that for about 6 months, and then moved on to another teacher. But obviously, when I heard Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, changed my life, and I think I listened almost like 2 hours a day to Led Zeppelin from the time I heard them, which was like seventh grade or sixth grade or something, all the way to the end of high school. I mean, that band to me was like the biggest influence.
hmm and this is kind of let's talk about how you're just like how did you like we're kind of just talking about how you started, which was like late elementary school, middle, or to through middle school. So let's talk about how did your playing evolve through like high school and college?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So, um, So, the reason, by the way, the reason why I liked Led Zeppelin so much and still do today, and in many ways, I'm so lucky that they were like my first influence. And I'll tell you why. To me, Zeppelin has that quality of they're four amazing, unique players who came together. And when they came together, they could improvise and play music on an even higher level. And you see that in them. And they had a real amazing range of music. Some they're influenced by folk music like Joni Mitchell and the blues, obviously, and they were also influenced by like Indian music, like Kashmir and stuff like that. And they were kind of like wild, wild guys. They travel around and do stuff. So, to me, they just had that special quality that I kind of refer to as Shakti now. Kind of like a spiritual energy that like that's what we are as musicians. We're trying to open ourselves up to this inspiration or this energy, and other musicians, we can inspire each other to go even higher. And that's why I always will love that band, and I feel many people feel that way about them and other music. So that was kind of like a great core band. And in high school, I did Battle of the Bands 4 years in a row. I did their variety show 4 years in a row. It was definitely an identity thing, because I remember how nervous I was to enter high school and just like didn't feel like I belonged or something, or I didn't have much confidence. And then all of a sudden, like right away, I got in a band with these fantastic musicians, some of which, like Mike Levine and Robin Kiefer and the bass player Rick Niles, he was a senior, and I was a freshman, but we were playing together, and so we started playing like Rush and Yes and Zeppelin, and it's just that there's a power to it that I'm sure you feel too. It's like all of us feel that way, not just guitar players. Like if you really connect with your instrument, something happens to you. You open up as a human being, and you have this. It's really difficult. You got to practice all the time, but then sometimes you transcend that. You all your practice comes together, and then you have a performance or a jam session or something, and it's just it is a slightly magical thing, to play. I wouldn't say probably slightly, but just not to over exaggerate. It's kind of magical to be a musician and have that ability. So anyway, but when I went to college, things totally changed. I had to go to most colleges, at least back when I went to college, you could major in classical or jazz. But there wasn't really rock college, like, there is a little bit now. You like probably you could find some streams, in LA or maybe Berkeley or something. But back then, and I think traditionally, it's rock or jazz, or I'm sorry, jazz or classical. So I actually kind of did both because to me, I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, I can be in a guitar ensemble and that could be my school, or I can study private jazz lessons and take an improv class in jazz. And that's what I study in school. It blew my mind. I never, nobody told me to be a professional musician, and I surely didn't have any in my family per se. So it was kind of like, wow, you can actually study this. And so I kind of stumbled my way into school more or less, and just got my mind blown. All of a sudden I had to play jazz with people who had been playing for since middle school or before, and I had to play classical music with musicians who've been playing since they were 3. So that first year was really difficult. I had to work really hard. I had to learn this new music and open my mind up to it, my ears. So I remember just walking around listening to jazz 24/7, just being like, what the hell are they doing? Like I couldn't figure it out. It's like, what is this music? I can't even understand. I don't even know if I like it. And I just like my personality is very tenacious. So I just kept going. And I'm like, and then something happened. It took a lot of work and pushing through. But I remember after that first year, something happened. I started being able to improvise and kind of hold my own a little bit better. And then the next bunch of years, I became more proficient at it.
And how did jazz change the way you or change your perception of music or the guitar?
Yeah, it turned it upside down. So in some ways, when you don't study formally, it's kind of beautiful because you're just sort of imitating, especially back when I was studying, no internet, no tools for transcribing. The only thing you knew is your friends down the street could play certain songs. So you go over to their house and you kind of learn what you can. And then so it was kind of this very organic way of playing. And then I would come home after school and just play solos. I learned like the blues scale or the pentatonic, and I just play over stuff and didn't really know intellectually too much what I was doing. It was just all soul, you know, and developed my technique and stuff. But then when I went to jazz school and studying classical guitar, at least for half of that, it was like all of a sudden you had to learn all this theory. You had to do ear training. You had to learn like there's all these modes and scales and they all work on these chords and you have to learn all these crazy chords and you have to improvise through it. So it was really like an immersion. I would tell people I'd get up at like 7 in the morning. I would literally come home sometimes 2, 3 in the morning that morning, and then do it again the next day. And at that age, when you're like 18, 19 years old and you're just in this environment, it's supportive and competitive, like, you all want to be as good as you can. You're all just vibing up on each other, but then it's also competitive. People kind of like little fractions or factions are made, and so it was kind of but it was so wonderful. And like those years and those years after that, of just playing like as much as I possibly could and learning as much. Those were kind of like the favorite part of my one huge favorite part of my education and life. It was like amazing. You know.
Mhm. When did you decide that you wanted to become a teacher?
Good question. I actually think like teaching kind of chooses you. So it was funny, Christian, when I was like your age, seventh, eighth grade, I had students. Like, I learned for about 6 months and then I started teaching. So it was very natural for me. And I remember I'd have like a plan on Saturdays and who was going to come over. And back then I had no policies. So people would come over if they wanted to and they wouldn't if they didn't. So some days I'd have like 7 students and then like two would show up or something. So, it took me a long time to refine it. And I feel like I am refining it still after almost 40 years. But I think teaching is kind of a calling, and a lot of this is kind of interesting because a lot of my musician friends here, or they don't understand it. They're like, "How can you teach?" Um, because they're just sort of immersed in their own playing or whatnot. And I have an answer for that. I mean, they may not like the answer, but the answer is to me, it's always been natural for me to learn, work on things, and then want to share it with people. The second thing that has grown over the years is just, enjoying other people's process, not just mine. So like Christian comes to me and he starts playing, he doesn't know what he likes, and then already within a year he's getting into like more metal and he's finding his path. That's exciting to me, and you're getting better at your playing, and you're filling in the things that you're deficient in. And to me, like, I can have that connection with a 3-year-old. I can have that connection with a 70-year-old. It's anybody who wants to learn, and it's quite wonderful actually. It's exciting to me. It's like I just get into it and I give my whole self to it, and that my students give back to me because of who they are, anyway. So it's completely wonderful. But teaching, I did develop. I in 2010, I got my master's in teaching, and then I taught in the schools for 2 years and realized that that wasn't a place for a rocker, So I was like, I felt I had put too much time and too much effort into my guitar, my own process, to go to a school and kind of teach general music. I want to teach serious people, people not like they have to be always serious, but people who really want to learn, And I find like I have 5, 6, 7 year olds who are amazing little musicians. And they're totally in the learning, and they don't have big egos yet. They do it just for the love. So for some people, they'd hate that. They'd be like, wait, you have to learn, Twinkle Twinkle. But I'm like, I'm presenting this to them. This is their first experience with music. And if I do it right, they'll have that same love and inspiration that I've had my whole life. And to me, that's like a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, I suppose.
And to people who per se when they want to be older, who want to be like gigging musicians, like is it like to say like hard to be a gigging musician, or what's like the sort of like process of becoming a gigging musician?
Yeah, two great questions, Christian. Well, I foresee you becoming definitely some form of gigging musician. You may do other things in life too. Most of my students do, but I see a focus in you that I think is really exciting. Obviously the game has changed a lot since I entered it till now, right? So now the online, doing videos and all that seems to be it's a huge part of it, And when I first was starting in the 90s playing professionally, we would go around with a cassette tape to the club or whatever and be like, hey, listen, we'd actually have a little player and we'd be like, hey, listen to my band. And you try to get a gig that way. So that's changed completely. So I think I have more spiritual advice for people who want to be musicians and more practical advice. So the practical advice is if you want to become professional artist, definitely study it. Study business, study the music business in particular. Usually, when you get a degree in music, you will have that course, and that'll be a very important course. So, or you can get books on your own, like how to do different things and understanding the different aspects of how to sustain yourself because it's hard. If you're a musician, probably all you want to do is play your music and not have to deal with the business. But in order to play your music, you have to deal with the business. So I think the more you can do that cleanly and in like a good-hearted way, then it starts to give back to you. Plus, you gain confidence in what you do. You become a very good teacher, and you're like, yeah, I'm giving a very good product, good, and then people can respond to that. Or your playing's the same way, but you have to do your business clean. So what I mean by that is, don't get too lured by the money. That seems to be a huge thing, especially in our culture. Like if you've made tons of money, or if you're on Spotify and you have 10 billion hits, you've made it or something. And not that you haven't made it, you've made a lot, that's very impressive. But or on a lower level, like if you've got a lot of gigs and you're making a lot of money, then you've made it. But I have a really different approach to that, and this is more about teaching too, being a calling. I believe being a musician is kind of a calling. So the trick is, and actually my great jazz mentor Alan Swain told me this um, back in the day. But I try not to do things with a focus on money. I set up the money. I charge what I think is fair. I do my business very clean. I've studied a lot of business now with my brothers and people who have helped me, but I don't do any of it for money so that I can be very pure about it. If I have a student, I'm going to really teach you. I'm going to give you as much as I can, right? And if I only taught you and thinking about like, oh man, this lesson's 45 minutes, I'm making X amount of dollars, you tend not to put your whole self into it. And I think that's a big disservice. So that's that. And then for the playing, you have to find out what makes you happy. Like, do you like to teach? Yes or no? If you don't like to teach, you shouldn't teach because it's really deep. It's just as deep as being an artist. But if you do like to teach, then you really, find a way to do it. If you like to play music, that has so many different avenues now. Do you Are you okay putting on a tux and playing with a wedding band where you get paid every week, but it's maybe not the greatest music that, unless you like that. Do you like going out as a solo musician? Do you like playing with a group? If you're doing an original group with original music, generally the demand tends to at least start with less, right? You have to build a reputation, build a fan base, and stuff like that. If you're playing covers or other things other people want, you might be able to have a band that works that way. So, I can only talk about my experience. In the 90s, I was out playing 5 times, 6 times a week, and I did that for a couple of decades, just playing anywhere and everywhere. I didn't care about the money. I was uh, had so much fire. I went all around the city to anywhere I'd want to play, and I'd come in with that tape and be like, "Hey, can my jazz trio play here or whatnot?" So I'm glad I did all that. That was like a lot of like how I cut my teeth or got, to a certain level with music. Um, Now it's a little different. Like it never felt good to me to do jobbing, which is like the wedding band. That just doesn't feel good to me. Going to a restaurant where I'm getting kind of underpaid and everyone's just drinking and talking and like maybe one person hears me, to me that kind of hurts my soul a little bit. Like I don't like to do that. Some people do, I don't. I'd much rather teach someone like you because I know we're gonna have an exchange. If I go out to those type of gigs, I want at least a friend to play with. Because if I play with another guitarist, we can at least vibe with each other. But what I tend to do now is either well-paying events or weddings. I book them. I book all my friends and colleagues of many, many years and myself. So then I'll get a really good jazz band together and I might play someone's wedding, but we all get paid very well and we get to play really good music. So that's cool. Or other things that I'll do is just creative stuff like, let's record something, let's write, together, or let's make a video together, or let's write a record together, right? And then creative gigs are also like that. Sometimes the most creative gigs don't always pay the best, but you might have a real audience that wants to listen to you. I might even do those things for free. Someone's having a flamenco jam in the back of their house. I'll just show up with my guitar and play with them just for the love, because then you have the exchange of the audience and the musicians and you create this joy together. And that's to me more important than the money by far. But it's hard because a lot of times our role as a musician, depending on what level you're at, a lot of people like background music. So they kind of like sort of a musician in the mix, but it's not so much like a performance. So at my older age of 50, I want to do more performances, more recordings. If I do go out and do a wedding or event, I'll do it in a certain way, but I kind of avoid those other areas of being professional, you know?
Okay. Yeah, you were just talking about flamenco. So, I don't know exactly know the timeline, but basically, I know you finished your music school. You're a professional jazz musician for a while. You're still teaching. When do you decide, and why do you decide to go to Spain and learn flamenco?
Yeah, that's such a man. You're really doing good here. These are like the best questions you can ask me, I feel. So that's great, or any artist. So yeah, so after doing jazz for 25 years and Brazilian jazz and different things, I recorded some records and played a bazillion gigs, taught a bazillion students, and I kind of got at that moment I got to the end of it. I was frustrated with myself, and I said, "Man, I need to do something fresh, something different." Which happens sometimes in your life. Now I'm at the point where I'm playing everything. I want to play everything. Um, but at that point, I've kind of fried out, I guess, or something. And so at those times, I went to Spain. I met some friends from Spain, and I went the first time myself, didn't speak Spanish, landed in Barcelona and just bounced around, met some friends. And I went back like 2 or 3 times because I loved it. But after I didn't get into flamenco till about the third or fourth time. And then I said, man, I love this country. The culture, everyone's in the street and people are so friendly and warm and generally. And then I got turned on to flamenco music and Spanish. Learning Spanish helps you communicate. So I started studying Spanish really hard and kept going back. And I went probably about 15 times now. And like the last like 7 or 8 every summer, I would just practice and play probably like 8 hours a day all summer long and just see amazing guitarist, amazing dancers, amazing singer, one after the next, doing concerts and stuff. So the Spanish thing, again, flamenco kind of bites at you. Like you see it. I kept looking at it for about a year or two. I'm like, that looks amazing, but it looks so difficult. I don't know if I should do it. And then I was like, hey, who cares? I'm going to try it. I'll start. So it kind of pulled me into it, and Spain did too. And it was a wonderful, adventure. You know.
Mhm. Okay, so just kind of finishing up your story. What do you want your future to be with music? Or
Yeah, I want Christian and you and me to form the best heavy metal band. We'll both. You have a flying V, so I'll have to get a flying V, and I'll just play like this and tap the whole time. Um, Yeah, just more at this point. I'm real humble. You know, I feel humble. I may not sound humble in the interview, but I feel just humble that my body's good. You know, good enough that I can continue to teach, and I have teachers teaching for me on different instruments. We have our studio, put on recitals, and then I play in the city and book other artists. I want to do more, like I said, more just creative things for no reason, but with all my friends and be like my piano playing friend in LA. Hey, look, I got this progression, or let's play on this tune. Here's my track. You put on a track, and do things just for the sake of the art, because I think that does get a little lost. You know, everybody's and understandably so. We have a lot of pressures financially as musicians, but you know, music's about being together. It's about inspiring each other. It's really about doing it for no other reason than to be able to play it. And I think people lose track of that, and it makes me kind of sad because it's like, where's your heart? Where's your spirit? You need to always be working on that. That's another important way to stay alive, you know?
And just going into some other topics, what are some different ways people who want to be involved in the music industry when they're older, what are different ways they can do that?
Yeah, now that, like I said, you know, things have changed so much that it's a new game even for me. For you know, so I think some ways you can do that is, you know, to cultivate a YouTube channel or like your Instagram, start putting out videos, and they have to be pretty good videos now. The quality has to be pretty good, and the content has to be pretty good. That's a big decision. So if you did that, I would say research it. You know, read some books on it and learn what you're doing. But that is seems to be one big way that people are out playing. Personally, how I learned it from my generation is to go hang out with people, go to the jam sessions, go create a jam session, call your friend who's a drummer, and have some people go in there and just play for hours for fun. That was really important to me, and that's something that's really changed a lot because everything's online, which is amazing. There's so much material. You have to kind of like sift through it because there's just so much stuff out there. And there's ways to make an income from that, which is positive. There's ways to share around the world and be inspired. That's all great. There's tools that you have that we never had, like you can slow down music and learn it. You could probably find charts on almost anything you want. You know, it's all online. But I think the old ways of playing, which is, you know, if I call it that, the ways that I learned, just get together with people and share and inspire. And you know, if you can become friends, that's the best. And then you just sort of like learn by being together. And then in addition to that, we played all around the city as much as we could. You know, we just played every gig we could, you know, for like 20, 30 years, just playing everywhere we could. And then, you know, the travel aspect of it, that was just like mind blowing because then you see this incredible art form that Spain has, which is so unique. And it's, you can only really understand that art form when you go to Spain and feel it, because it's especially in Andalusia in the south of Spain, because there's just musicians all over the place, and it's just part of their culture, and that was powerful to me because our culture is such a mishmash of everything. It has everything. Of course, people come here to make it, and especially New York and LA and stuff like that. And it has all these types of music, but it's really an amazing treat to see some world music from a particular part of the world and feel that power of their culture to go to that country, you know, whether it's Brazil or whether it's India or wherever, Africa. And then you hear musicians and just that tradition so strong. That's very inspiring, you know.
Mhm. And let's get more into like the modern music industry. So let's talk about like who are some influences or like some like artists you really like from the past like maybe like 10 years or so.
Okay,
And like
last 10 years. Yeah. Okay, that's hard. What do you have a genre, Christian, you want to hear or no? Like, do you want
just
to talk about a particular genre or just anybody?
I mean just in general, like I mean I feel like a lot of times we talk about like rock and like metal and stuff like that. But just tell me like even like maybe like pop artist or even like yeah, like rock artists in general or pop artists.
That's a tough one. When we talk about rock and pop, I tend to go more in the past to find my inspiration. You know, there is stuff out there that I do like now, but I just tend to. Although I listen to everything, Right now, there's a couple jazz musicians that are extremely inspiring to me. They've been around for a while, but they just have such a deep and distinctive style. Julian Lodge is one of them, and then Kurt Rosenwinkel is another one that I find amazing. Um, but they've been around. They're kind of, I think Julian might be a little younger than me, and Kurt might be a little older, but they're still doing work that I feel is really progressive and really inspiring. In the pop and rock realms, it's a little more tricky. In the pop realms, I teach a lot of usually female students who are younger and they're singing really well, and then they learn guitar, and then I teach them play chords and write songs and stuff, and they kind of keep me in tune with the pop songs. And I actually do like some of the pop songs, like who's the girl who did Deja Vu, and Olivia Rodriguez. So she has two songs out, Deja Vu and what's the other one called? It's like Driver's License. And they're beautiful songs. They're well written and that sort of thing. Personally, my pop people that I like old Sia, you know, not the newer stuff that she's doing, but like her older stuff with 07, and then some of her solo records I thought were really great. So I kind of tend to go backwards for my people. Rock's a tough one too, because you know, I don't know
Okay, yeah,
that many. Yeah,
you know,
what's that?
like there's always like this saying, like rock is dead, but it's not necessarily that. I would almost say like rock isn't what it used to be. Like it's not. I wouldn't say it's not good, but it's not like Zeppelin and AC/DC and things like that. Um, Currently, obviously, I'm really into Greta Van Fleet, and so are a lot of other people. That's probably the most like recent, like really like popular, like classic rock band. But then from like if we're talking like 10 years ago, like there's a band from Australia called Airborne that does, a lot of heavy rock stuff that
Hmm.
is good, and they're still pretty involved. They're still making records and stuff. And then as far as like even like metal, like I think metal is more, you could say, like popular, but it's even more like involved than rock is now. And there's so many different subgenres of metal. Like there's, like the sort of instrumental melodic metal, like with like Polyphia. And then,
Yeah.
there's
Or
a,
Pliny, right? Pliny is the other
yeah.
band. I like
Mhm.
that band. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were also, and then even today, like rock bands from like 30, 40 years ago are still popular. Like Metallica is obviously still touring, and Megadeth, and all these metal bands. And then so is like Guns N' Roses and Yes, and
Hmm.
all these bands. So yeah, I feel like when you're talking about modern music, you can still mention those artists that were popular 30, 40 years ago because they're still active in the music industry today.
Or they just set, you know, they gave us a really beautiful thing. You know, like Led Zeppelin's not active per se. Maybe they're active selling things or whatever, but the band broke up, but they gave us such amazing albums, such inspiration, you know. But I do feel, yeah, there's definitely great rock bands out there. I sort of hear more people like that I'm inspired by that are young, more on Instagram or something like that. Like that guitar player Chris Buck, I think he's a beautiful guitar player, beautiful rock player. And there's a guy in Austin. What's his name? His dad played with his dad was like the bass player for Eric Johnson, and he's I forget his name right this moment, but he is, wow, what a monstrous, really good rock player. So there's people out there, and I'm sure there's tons more bands. I just don't really have like endless time to search for them per se. You know, I'm more checking out flamenco, checking out Brazilian jazz, checking out jazz. Um, and then when I get the hankering for something, I'll put on a Yes tune or King Crimson song. I'll be like, hey, what did that sound like? You know, and it's kind of fun because the stuff that you're discovering now when you're my age, it always has a special quality to it. You know, you're like, hey, I will put on Tangerine by Zeppelin. You put it on and you're like, oh my God, that brings you right back to when you first hear it. It still has that aliveness. But there's definitely a lot of more rock bands. I mean, for me, a band that's really interesting is Punch Brothers. You know, they've been around for a while. They're kind of like a bluegrass band. I love getting my mind blown. I never really listened much to bluegrass, and my friend brought me to see them play, and it just blew my mind. So for me, I always tell you, like, Genre doesn't matter to me. Even artists don't matter to me, although you'll start to follow them. Just inspirational music, people who are really doing giving their heart and soul to something. And sometimes like newer music takes a lot more to listen to. Like you have to listen to the record 6 7 times, and then you're like, oh my god, that's amazing. But the first 6 times you're like, what is going on? you know so anyway, I love just catching anything good, any genre, country and western, rap, hip hop. I don't care what it is. Like, just give me something good, give me somebody who's really doing it with their spirit, that and inspire me, and then I'll listen to it.
Kind of talking about rap and hip hop, do you think it might be hard for like someone who's interested in becoming a hip hop artist or a rap artist to almost like have a unique sound in a day of age of like, obviously like rap and hip hop, but like especially with like auto tune?
Yeah, I mean, for me being an older guy, like mostly I do like some electronica music, like I had mentioned 07. They have some beautiful records, but what I love about it is they use some electronic sounds and then some natural sounds. And to me, as a musician, when somebody's playing an instrument or singing for real, or it's a live performance, it just has a certain power. It's like that unspeakable connection that I have with it, that warmth, that human quality or something. And when it goes all electronic, except you have one voice that's auto-tuned, I can appreciate it. Like, I'll listen to some music like that and I'll be like, man, it sounds great. The production's great. But I'm like, I wish there were real drums. If that was a real drummer playing, it would just hit me more, me particularly. And then the auto tune kind of like squishes it in some weird way. And when you listen to like Amy Winehouse or like Sia's like that, these singers who can really sing, um, there's going to be some mistakes. They're going to hit some notes not perfectly. They're going to express themselves. It's kind of like what Jim Paul said. He'd rather see a guitar player go for something, meaning improvise, you know, and go for something and miss it, than have everything worked out. Because if you have everything worked out, maybe that's one road. It's not a bad thing, but sometimes the aliveness, the spontaneity can get lost, right? But when someone's going for something and they're like, they miss it, but the emotion is so strong and the intent so strong, that actually sounds cool. Have you ever noticed that on those old records? Like sometimes the mistakes are the coolest part. That's the part that like you're like, how did that come out of that person? Like a
Yeah, and
Jimmy
then
Page
even
solo or
like
something.
almost like the you could say purposeful mistakes. So like obviously like I was watching a video talking about the Blizzard of Oz and Randy Rhoads
Hmm.
talking about how he would like double track his guitar. So on one track he'd do the solo, you could say perfectly. And then the next track he'd change certain notes and it'd give the solo something that it'd give the solo like almost a different dimension that this guy was breaking it down and was like talking about how like if you play in some weird ways, like if he was playing an E and one fret and then an F sharp on another fret, he was saying how sometimes like those notes don't sound good when they're playing together, but when they're double tracked over each other, it like adds a different dimension, like I was saying, and that's why a lot of people haven't been able to replicate his you could say his sound and technique
Mm.
because he would change certain things when he was double tracking his solo.
Yeah, yeah, he's sort of an innovator, trying out different things. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, different strokes for different folks, but I like I say, I try to weed through all this stuff that's on the internet and Spotify and YouTube, and I'm just trying to find the gems, like what really grasps me. And every week I actually listen to the new release on Spotify. I go through the whole thing and I listen to it as best I can, and some of it I'm like, oh, I don't like that right away, and some stuff it catches me. So yeah, but there's no shortage of amazing people doing amazing things for sure.
And last question, what do you hope for in the future of just music in general?
Ah, man, that's a great question too. I It's sort of like my deep hope for us as people. Like, number one, we got to protect this planet. If we want to have a healthy planet, we have to survive And not only that, but I'm hoping that our these walls that we have between each other are become less and less, you know, and we see each other more as like we're one amazing being with sharing this amazing planet with so many other beings, you know, animals and people from all different cultures. So I just hope, you know, music continues to be a source of inspiration, a source of healing for people. And I think as people, we have to keep opening up our hearts. That's our like number one job, is to keep opening up our hearts, whatever, you know, prejudice we have in our heart, whatever form that takes. Question yourself, you know what I mean? A lot of that's just our conditioning. You know, the point, I feel the big point on the earth is to help each other, inspire each other, have a joyous life, you know. And part of how we have to do that is we have to take a sort of lessen those things that uh, take that away, like if anger or jealousy or competitiveness or you know, me, too much me, I, me, mine, you know, this is for me, I want more money, I'm a guy. That's a big danger, I think, for someone more your age than mine, because we had no internet, so nobody was anybody. We were just a bunch of kids running around, and we could run around till like late at night, you know, and then nobody knew where we were, down at the park just goofing around, and then we'd come home, right? So but now with your generation, everything's like posted and responded to, and you guys have a whole deeper thing to navigate through, but you can definitely navigate through it. And the way to do that, I think, believe in your good heart. We all have good hearts, you know, and if circumstances or other things pull us away, you know, we'll suffer more and we'll make other people suffer more. So I think the thing is, believe in your good heart and believe that your real deep thing is to be kind to each other and kind to yourself and to share your talents, not to compete, right? And not even just to make money. And definitely, I don't even think it's to be somebody. I think we have too many people thinking they're somebody. I'm so important. Get out of my way, you know. But it's like, I think the real joy, and maybe that's why I love teaching and why I love playing, you can forget yourself, you get so into it. Like this interview, I don't remember what I said, I'm just inspired, and it's not me saying it, I'm just going with the energy of the inspiration. So as musicians, we have a choice. We either can get competitive and cocky and more me, more, I want more from me, or you can go the other direction, which is like, you know, how can I share, how can I help other people? I don't know. That's what I just kind of hope, I guess.
All right. Thanks a lot, Marty. Once again, this was Martin Metzger, professional rock, blues, jazz, flamenco, and everything in between guitarist. Was also my guitar teacher and myself and my dad's personal friend. So thanks, Marty.
Thank you, Christian. You did a great job. Thank you.
Okay. So are we good then?
We are good.